If in an alternative timeline you had told me that an animated film starring the guy from Tenacious D as a panda would have the best representation of Kung Fu in Western media, I would have asked how many toads you had licked.
It really has become a cliche at this point to say that Kung Fu Panda is a film much like its protagonist that you should not judge by its cover. But that is something that works in its favour. I think that if this film had been given the expectations of, say, Pixar, it may have been weighed down by it, but instead it was able to fly under the radar, bearing the sneers and jeers before surprising everyone.
But of course that was in 2008 when the first film came out, but now with sequels, merchandise, TV shows, and another trilogy on the way, does that all still hold up? Did this first film have that surprise up its sleeve only, or was there anything more for people to come back to? Does it still have that impact so many years later?
Directed by Mark Osborne and John Stevenson, and written by Jonathan Abel, Glenn Berger, and Ethan Reef. The film stars Jack Black as Po, the son of a noodle restaurant owner played by James Hong, who is a lover of all things martial arts, and dreams of one day becoming a great warrior. One day, the aged Master Uruguay, played by Randall Duck Kim, prophesizes of the return of the disgraced student, Tai Lung, played by Ian McShane, and so prepares to select one person to become the legendary Dragon Warrior. But when Po is chosen instead of prospective students, including Tigress, played by Angelina Jolie, Dustin Hoffman's Shifu makes to get rid of him as fast as possible, so that someone who actually knows what they are doing can be chosen instead. But when Tai Lung breaks free and Uguay passes on, Shifu puts his gripes aside and begins teaching Po to become a martial arts master. Will Po be ready in time to face Tai Lung? Will Po master the secrets of the Dragon Scroll? How long should I drag this out?
Okay, let's be honest, this is a film that everyone has seen or at least knows of the plot by now. I mean, this is a film that's been talked about, analysed, critiqued, praised, and pretty much done everything with so far. Something I've found interesting when people have talked about this is that when people have spoken about the antagonists for this trilogy, the first one seems to be one that people overlook or find to be boring or lesser than the others. And I don't really think that's true. If we look at this film through a Jungian lens, some things really do pop out in this film. And things turn out to be a lot more interesting.
First we have our protagonist of Po, the innocent or the child. Now biologically he's not a child, but he looks with a child's eyes. He works with his father in his noodle restaurant with the dream of being a kung fu master. This is his idea of paradise or utopia, not limited by such things as his size or weight, as he then struggles to get off the floor, or accidentally leaves a throwing star in the soup.
But the thing about children or innocents is that they are full of potential.
Po does have the potential to be what he wants to be, he just needs help to see it. Now this is when he meets the two masters. Uguay, or the Sage, who sees his potential and chooses him to become the Dragon Warrior, unlike Shifu, or the Ruler. His whole world is maintained through order and control, exercising his power frequently in order to see the results he wants in his students. So now that someone outside of his control, someone who he doesn't know, has been given this position, and in his ordered world, pandas are not warriors. It's more likely someone like Tigress, someone who has that predatory nature. So now that this child has been chosen instead, his first reaction is confusion, and then it is to regain that control by trying to make Po leave. But Uguay, again the Sage, the repository of wisdom of this culture, is trying to teach Shifu that lesson, that you cannot plan or control for everything, that sometimes you need that little extra bit of chaos thrown into the mix so that things can be shaken up and possibly made better. Otherwise you get a situation where there's too much order, and that is just tyranny. The result of which we see with Tai Lung, the rebel. Once he stood as the hero archetype, strong and determined, looking up to the ruler or Shifu as a father.
As this sort of thing happens with fathers in particular, as they are the ones that set the boundaries in the household. They are the ones that establish order and act as disciplinarian.
But because Tai Lung has at this point been raised to follow the rules, act in accordance with order and done as he's told, he doesn't have that established sense of self, that willingness to go along with the chaos. So when the rules are changed and is denied the Dragon Scroll, the next step in the order he's been following, his confusion like Shifu gives way to re-establishing control by trying to take the scroll. which he fails in and is captured, leading to his anger and resentment stewing for years. What Tai Lung, like any adolescent, needs is to have a chance to vent, to confront, because the rules have changed, and he doesn't understand why. So instead of developing, he remains imprisoned in this adolescent stage for 20 years.
But how will all of this factor into the fight scenes? Let's take a look and find out.
The scene we're going to be looking at here is the one between Shifu and Tai Lung, the father and the son, or the ruler and the rebel. Once it is made clear that Tai Lung cannot get what he wants through diplomacy, or at least what his version of it is, by placating the hierarchy he was raised in, acting as master and student, and Shifu says, "No, we're not playing that game, you're not my student anymore, you're an adult now and we're going to act like it," he resorts to violence, starting with a high overhead kick before kicking a chunk of rock at Shifu, which he breaks through magic, I guess, before being kicked through the door of the temple, the place which was once the ground of taking that potential Tai Lung had and galvanizing it into productivity, which is also where we get more of what led Tai Lung to this state. That not only did he expect to earn this scroll because he worked for it, or it was part of a process, but because he had been primed for it by Shifu.
It's almost analogous to schools, which take this potential that kids have, this boundless energy and potential that children have, and say, we're going to take that potential and we're going to mold it, we're going to work it until you come out the other side a productive member of society, and hopefully fully competent and able. Because this is the promise that schools make.
But what has happened here is that not only has Tai Lung been molded and worked, but he's also been primed for a certain position. He's like an overachiever who's been told he'll get a position at Harvard or Yale because that is what he needs to become an adult.
Which is something that a lot of people are told now. Get a degree or you won't become a functioning member of society.
But Tai Lung was passed on this opportunity, with no fallback plan or no support in place. Also due to how his development was focused mostly on the external rather than the internal. Grow stronger, faster, tougher, and reach the goal. As we see, this differs from Po, who has spent most of the film in that child state, the innocent, naive youth, full of potential, but now he's been educated a bit, nurtured in his potential, and here, with the scroll, he learns that introspective lesson, that his own ability and his own potential is enough, he just needs the confidence and discipline to harness it. There is no secret ingredient. This is Po entering adolescence. But back to the fight, as Tai Lung grabs Oogway's staff before blocking 2 kicks from Shifu, retaliating with a side kick of his own, trying to sweep Shifu, but it seems having a tougher time targeting due to Shifu's smaller stature and greater speed. Tai Lung finally pins him to the ground with the staff, weaponizing the symbol of the sage of wisdom against his father figure, subsequently breaking it, showcasing how when rebellious anger meets order, there can be no room for wisdom, which is needed for growth. Tai Lung wastes no time going in for a fly kick, which Shifu blocks. The fight moves into the air, aping Wuxia style films, but it feels more like the Matrix 3 given the colour scheme. Tai Lung continues as aggressor, adding several kicks and a slashing strike to the fight, but Shifu catches his arm and pins him in a more defensive movement, often used to end the fight by making one's opponent unable to fight on. Adding to that feeling that despite Shifu doing this out of duty, he does not want to fight Tai Lung any more than he has to. After all, why would a father want to fight his son? But Tai Lung breaks the hold and sends Shifu through the ceiling first, then once again kicking him away. Tai Lung continues to strike at Shifu, wearing him out due to the force and breaking his guards and blocks, finishing with a cannon strike. Finally, Shifu tries to break through to his son one last time, admitting that he didn't help Tai Lung in the way he needed. It goes back to again, too much order but not enough balance. He apologizes for how he made Tai Lung grow up, but it's too late. Tai Lung is too far gone now. That, or maybe he needed more time to mull this talk over without the immediate stimuli of the scroll, and let his words sink in properly. Instead, Tai Lung fights Po. Like Shifu, Tai Lung underestimates Po because in his worldview, pandas are not warriors. But this panda ends up defeating him and sending him to the spirit world because developmentally, Po is further along than him. When Tai Lung looks at the scroll and sees himself, he says that there's nothing. Sadly, as he never developed himself internally, unlike Po, who sees himself, his own potential and ability, which is all that's needed, as evidenced when Po performs a near impossible technique that he was threatened with earlier and never officially instructed on, figuring it out on his own. And skadoosh! The day is saved.
Ultimately, this film showcases how someone can develop either positively or negatively. Looking at this film through a Jungian lens shows that despite this being a film which is predicated on that "don't judge a book by its cover" message, it still has all those classic elements which showcase all those timeless themes that people have come to again and again.
the movement from childhood to adolescence, the importance of education and realization of potential, order versus chaos, and even those with more recent connotations of what happens when someone is primed for disappointment.
The rest of this film series showcases Poe's journey through adolescence as he comes to terms with his own identity outside of just his own potential and his role he has gained of the Dragon Warrior, and also gaining a greater perspective on his community as well as his own identity outside of his role. With this trilogy ending in Poe landing in a place of adulthood, and the promise is that with this next trilogy, they have said that he will be moving into more of that adult stage. And honestly, I'm excited to see what will happen next. Will Poe become a father in turn? Or will he become the ruler? Will he become the sage? Will he become something else? Knowing Poe, it'll probably be something of all of these and still Jack Black. But until we know for certain, thank you all for watching this week's video, and until next time everyone, peace be with you.